Hi everybody, how are you? Welcome to Truth for Satan. Today is March the 12th, Sunday, and this is another reading for you guys for your edification and enjoyment. And this one is an excerpt from The Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. And I'm starting on page 128. And this chapter is about the sun, a universal deity. So he's talking about the sun, which I found very interesting because I'm in the middle of doing a bunch of article series about sun symbolism and how it has been co-opted and appropriated by these evil, archontic, negative ETs and AIs, and just it's a whole coalition or group of negatives who have been using the earth as an animal farm for millennia, and how they've infiltrated and they've also stolen a lot of our symbolism and inverted it and made it work for them against us. So when, just by sheer coincidence, I came across this writing, I thought, you know what, this would be a really interesting read for people. And I just want to say that just because I'm reading some article from whatever does not always compute that it means that I agree 100% with whatever it is that they have to say. It doesn't necessarily mean that at all. But I do think that the information is very interesting, and it's just another point of view, and I hope you enjoy it. So, we are starting off here. It's entitled The Sun, a Universal Deity. The adoration of the sun was one of the earliest and most natural forms of religious expression. My interjection right there would be, it totally makes sense, right? This sun symbol began with us. Like, we're the ones that put the power and the meaning into it. And like I said, the sun symbolism was appropriated by the enemy of humanity and used against us. Continuing, complex modern theologies are merely involvements and amplifications of this simple aboriginal belief. The primitive mind, recognizing the beneficent power of the solar orb, adored it as the proxy of the supreme deity. Concerning the origin of sun worship, Albert Pike makes the following concise statement in his Morals and Dogma. To them, the sun was the innate fire of bodies, the fire of nature, author of life, heat, and ignition. He was to them the efficient cause of all generation, for without him there was no movement, no existence, no form. He was to them immense, indivisible, imperishable, and everywhere present. It was their need of light and of his creative energy that was felt by all men, and nothing was more fearful to them than his absence. His beneficent influences caused his identification with the principle of good. And the Brahma of the Hindus, and Mithras of the Persians, and Atham, Ammon, Ptah, and Osiris of the Egyptians, the Baal of the Chaldeans, the Adonai of the Phoenicians, the Adonis and Apollo of the Greeks, became but personifications of the sun, the regenerating principle, image of that fecundity which perpetuates and rejuvenates the world's existence. End quote. Among all the nations of antiquity, altars, mounds, and temples were dedicated to the worship of the orb of the day. The ruins of these sacred places yet remain, notable among them being the pyramids of Yucatan in Egypt, the snake mounds of the American Indians, the ziggurats of Babylon and Chaldea, the round towers of Ireland, and the massive rings of uncut stone in Britain and Normandy. The Tower of Babel, which, according to the scriptures, was built so that man might reach up to God, was probably an astronomical observatory. Many early priests and prophets, both pagan and Christian, were versed in astronomy and astrology. Their writings are best understood when read in the light of these ancient sciences. With the growth of man's knowledge of the constitution and periodicity of the heavenly bodies, astronomical principles and terminology were introduced into his religious systems. The tutelary gods were given planetary thrones, the celestial bodies being named after the deities assigned to them. That's very interesting to me right there. I just got to interject. They're saying that the celestial bodies were named after the deities assigned to them. So the deities came before the celestial bodies? Okay. The fixed stars were divided into constellations, and through these constellations wandered the sun and its planets, the latter with their accompanying satellites. The sun, as supreme among the celestial bodies visible to the astronomers of antiquity, was assigned to the highest of the gods and became symbolic of the supreme authority of the Creator himself. From a deep philosophic consideration of the powers and principles of the sun has come the concept of the Trinity as it is understood in the world today. The tenet of a triune divinity is not peculiar to Christian or Mosaic theology. And I'm going to interject right there. Right? Satan holds a trident, for example. Triune. Okay? The tenet of a triune divinity is not peculiar to Christian or Mosaic theology, but forms a conspicuous part of the dogma of the greatest religions of both ancient and modern times. The Persians, Hindus, Babylonians, and Egyptians had their trinities. In every instance, these represented the threefold form of one supreme intelligence. In modern Masonry, the deity is symbolized by an equilateral triangle, its three sides, representing the primary manifestations of the Eternal One, who is himself represented as a tiny flame. The Hebrews called this Yod. Jacob Boehme, the Teutonic mystic, called the Trinity the Three Witnesses, by means of which the invisible is made known to the visible, tangible universe. The origin of the Trinity is obvious to anybody who will observe the daily manifestations of the sun. This orb, being the symbol of all light, has three distinct phases: rising, midday, and setting. The philosophers therefore divided the life of all things into three distinct parts: growth, maturity, and decay. Between the twilight of dawn and the twilight of evening is the high noon of resplendent glory. God the Father, the creator of the world, is symbolized by the dawn. His color is blue because the sun rising in the morning is veiled in blue mist. Remember, like I'm saying, I'm just reading this, okay? I don't necessarily agree with everything that they're saying. I just have to interject that. God the Son, the illuminating one, sent to bear witness of his Father before all the worlds, is the celestial globe at noonday, radiant and magnificent. Ew, the maned Lion of Judah. Ugh, the golden-haired Savior of the world. Okay, I'm reading it. I'm just reading it. Yellow is his color, and his power is without end. God, the Holy Ghost, is the sunset phase. When the orb of day, robed in flaming red, rests for a moment upon the horizon line, and then vanishes into the darkness of the night to wander the lower worlds and later rise again, triumphant from the embrace of darkness. Sorry, but when I read this Christian stuff, it just makes me want to hurl. I can't help it. Continuing. To the Egyptians, the sun was a symbol of immortality, for, while it died each night, it rose again with each ensuing dawn. Not only has the sun this diurnal activity, but it also has its annual pilgrimage, during which time it passes successively through the 12 celestial houses of the heavens, remaining in each for 30 days. Added to these, it has a third path of travel, which is called the precession of the equinoxes, in which it retrogrades around the zodiac through the 12 signs at the rate of 1 degree every 72 years. Concerning the annual passage of the sun through the 12 houses of the heavens, Robert Hewitt Brown, 32-degree Mason, makes the following statement. It's funny, he just calls him Robert Hewitt Brown, 32 degrees. He doesn't specify. That's a Masonic, okay? That's a Mason. He's almost at the very top, which would be 33, but that we know of anyway. So, anyways, this person makes the following statement. The sun, as he pursued his way among the living creatures of the zodiac, was said in allegorical language either to assume the nature of or to triumph over the sign he entered. The sun thus became a bull in Taurus, and it was worshipped as such by the Egyptians under the name of Apis, and by the Assyrians as Baal, or Bull. In Leo, the sun became a lion slayer, Hercules, and an archer in Sagittarius. In Pisces, the fishes, he was a fish, Dagon or Vishnu, the fish god of the Philistines and the Hindus. A careful analysis of the religious systems of pagandom uncovers much evidence of the fact that its priests served the solar energy and that their supreme deity was in every case this divine light personified. Godfrey Higgins, after 30 years of inquiry into the origin of religious beliefs, is of the opinion that all the gods of antiquity resolved themselves into the solar fire, sometimes itself as God, or sometimes an emblem of that higher principle known by the name of the creative being, or God. The Egyptian priests in many of their ceremonies wore the skins of lions, which were symbols of the solar orb, owing to the fact that the sun is exalted, dignified, and most fortunately placed in the constellation of Leo. Think of the Sphinx. That's me interjecting. I mean, look at the Sphinx, right? It's half lion, half man, right? Anyway, continuing, which he rules, and which was at one time the keystone of the celestial arch. Again, Hercules is the solar deity. For as this mighty hunter performed his 12 labors, so the sun, in traversing the 12 houses of the zodiac, performs during his pilgrimage 12 essential and benevolent labors for the human race and for nature in general. Hercules, like the Egyptian priests, wore the skin of a lion for a girdle. The sun rising over the back of the lion, or astrologically in the back of the lion, has always been considered symbolic of power and rulership. A symbol very similar to the one above, there's an image here, appears on the flag of Persia, whose people have always been sun worshippers. Kings and emperors have frequently associated their terrestrial power with the celestial power of the solar orb and have accepted the sun or one of its symbolic beasts or birds as their emblem. Witness the lion of the great Mogul and the eagles of Caesar and Napoleon, and also the winged globe of Egypt. Don't forget about that one. I could go off on a tangent on that. There's a whole lot of really interesting information about that, but I'm going to continue reading instead. This symbol of the winged globe of Egypt, which appears over the pylons or gates of many Egyptian palaces and temples, is emblematic of the three persons of the Egyptian Trinity. The wings, the serpents, and the solar orb are the insignia of Amun, Ra, and Osiris. They said Hercules, like the Egyptian priests, wore the skin of a lion for a girdle, and there was also a Hebrew hero named Samson. And as his name implies, was also a solar deity. His fight with the Nubian lion, his battles with the Philistines, who represent the powers of darkness. Oh, okay. And his memorable feat of carrying off the gates of Gaza all refer to aspects of solar activity. Many of the ancient peoples had more than one solar deity. In fact, all of the gods and goddesses were supposed to partake, in part at least, of the sun's effulgence. The golden ornaments used by the priestcraft of the various world religions are again a subtle reference to the solar energy, as are also the crowns of kings. Corona. In ancient times, coronas, that's my note, had a number of points extending outward like the rays of the sun. But modern conventionalism has in many cases either removed the points or else bent them inward, gathered them together, and placed an orb or cross upon the point where they meet. Many of the ancient prophets, philosophers, and dignitaries carried a scepter the upper end of which bore a representation of the solar globe surrounded by emanating rays. And I just have to interject there. A lot of times the scepter also had what appeared to be like an acorn at the top, which was actually symbolic of the pineal gland, that third eye, which is like the gateway into all the other alternate dimensions. So we're talking about occult wisdom here, okay? Anyways, back to this reading. All the kingdoms of earth were but copies of the kingdoms of heaven, and the kingdoms of heaven were best symbolized by the solar kingdom, in which the sun was the supreme ruler, the planets his privy council, and all of nature the subjects of his empire. Many deities have been associated with the sun. The Greeks believed that Apollo, Bacchus, Dionysus, Sabazius, Hercules, Jason, Ulysses, Zeus, Uranus, and Vulcan partook of either the visible or invisible attributes of the sun. The Norwegians regarded Balder the Beautiful as a solar deity, and Odin is often connected with the celestial orb, especially because of his one eye. Among the Egyptians, Osiris, Ra, Anubis, Hermes, and even the mysterious Amun himself had points of resemblance with the solar disk. Isis was the mother of the sun, and even Typhon, the destroyer, was supposed to be a form of solar energy. The Egyptian sun myth finally centered around the person of a mysterious deity called Serapis. The two Central American deities, Tezcatlipoca and Quetzalcoatl, while often associated with the winds, were also undoubtedly solar gods. In Masonry, the sun has many symbols. One expression of the solar energy is Solomon, whose name, Sol-Am-On, is the name for the supreme light in 3 different languages. Like I said, I'm just reading this, okay? Hiram Abif, the Hiram of the Chaldees, is also a solar deity, and the story of his attack and murder by the ruffians with its solar interpretation will be found in the chapter The Hiramic Legend. A striking example of the important part which the sun plays in the symbols and rituals of Freemasonry is given by George Oliver D.D. in his Dictionary of Symbolical Masonry as follows, quote, "The sun rises in the east, and in the east is the place for the worshipful master. As the sun is the source of all light and warmth, so should the worshipful master enliven and warm the brethren to their work." Among the ancient Egyptians, the sun was a symbol of divine providence. End quote. The Hierophants of the mysteries. Now, that's interesting because in the tarot, right, the Hierophant is the mediator between man and God. So what they're saying here is that these people, these Hierophants of the mysteries, are kind of like the mediators between God and, I guess, man. Really, they're deciding who gets to know this occult knowledge, the mysteries, and who doesn't get to know, basically. That's the way I see that. Anyways, the Hierophants of the mysteries were adorned with many insignia emblematic of solar power. The sunbursts of gilt embroidery on the back of the vestments of the Catholic priesthood signify that the priest is also an emissary and representative of Sol Invictus. Christianity and the sun. For reasons which they doubtlessly considered sufficient, those who chronicled the life and acts of Jesus found it advisable to metamorphise him into a solar deity. The historical Jesus was forgotten. Nearly all the salient incidents recorded in the 4 Gospels have their correlations in the movements, phases, or functions of the heavenly bodies. Among other allegories borrowed by Christianity from pagan antiquity is the story of a beautiful blue-eyed sun god with his golden hair falling upon his shoulders, robed from head to foot in spotless white, and carrying in his arms the Lamb of God, symbolic of the vernal equinox. This handsome youth is a composite of Apollo, Osiris, Orpheus, Mithras, Bacchus, for he has certain characteristics in common with each of these pagan deities. My note, they ripped all that stuff off to create their fucking savior of the world, and then forced this down people's throats in the Dark Ages using fire and gibbet and sword. Fuck me. Anyway, sorry. Going on. The philosophers of Greece and Egypt divided the life of the sun during the year into 4 parts. Therefore, they symbolized the solar man by 4 different figures. When he was born in the winter solstice, the sun god was symbolized as a dependent infant who in some mysterious manner had managed to escape the powers of darkness seeking to destroy him while he was still in the cradle of winter. The sun, being weak at this season of the year, had no golden rays, but the survival of the light through the darkness of winter was symbolized by one tiny hair, which alone adorned the head of the celestial child. It says in brackets, as the birth of the sun took place in Capricorn, it was often represented as being suckled by a goat. At the vernal equinox, the sun had grown to be a beautiful youth. His golden hair hung in ringlets on his shoulders, and his light, as Schiller said, extended to all parts of infinity. At the summer solstice, the sun became a strong man, heavily bearded, who, in the prime of maturity, symbolized the fact that nature at this period of the year is strongest and most fecund. At the autumnal equinox, the sun was pictured as an aged man shuffling along with bended back and whitened locks into the oblivion of winter darkness. Thus, 12 months were assigned to the sun as the legend of its life. During this period, it circled the 12 signs of the zodiac in a magnificent, triumphal march. When fall came, it entered like Samson into the house of Delilah, Virgo, where its rays were cut off and it lost its strength. In Masonry, the cruel winter months are symbolized by 3 murderers who sought to destroy the god of light and truth. The coming of the sun was hailed with joy. The time of its departure was viewed as a period to be set aside for sorrow and unhappiness. This glorious radiant orb of day, the true light which lighteth every man who cometh into the world, the supreme benefactor who raised all things from the dead, who fed the hungry multitudes, stilled the tempest, who after dying rose again and restored all things to life. This supreme spirit of humanitarianism and philanthropy is known to the Christendom as Christ, the Redeemer of worlds, the only begotten of the Father, the Word made flesh, and the hope of glory. Okay, anyway. The pagans set aside the 25th of December as the birthday of the solar man. They rejoiced, feasted, gathered in processions, and made offerings in the temples. You know why I gag like that? Because, they just stole all that stuff. Okay? These monsters who created this false, fake god stole all that symbology and so on from an earlier tradition. It's stolen. And that's why I gag at it. I think it, and also because it's been used to enslave and be a tool of mind control for the masses for millennia, 3 millennia. So yeah, I have a bit of a problem with Christianity. Okay, anyways. The pagans set aside the 25th of December as the birthday of the solar man. They rejoiced, feasted, gathered in processions, and made offerings in the temples. The darkness of winter was over, and the glorious sun of light, returning to the northern hemisphere. With his last effort, the old sun god had torn down the house of the Philistines, the spirits of darkness, and had cleared the way for the new sun that was born that day from the depths of the earth amidst the symbolic beasts of the lower world. Concerning this season of celebration, an anonymous Master of Arts of Balliol College, Oxford, in his scholarly treatise, mankind, their origin and destiny says, quote, "The Romans also had their solar festival and their games of the circus in honor of the birth of the god of day. It took place the 8th day before the calends of January, that is, on December 25th. Servius, in his commentary on verse 720 of the 7th book of the Aeneid, in which Virgil speaks of the new sun, says that, properly speaking, the sun is new on the 8th of the calends of January, that is, December 25th. In the time of Leo I, some of the fathers of the church said that what rendered the festival venerable was less the birth of Jesus Christ, well, no shit, since it's made up, but anyways, than the return, and, as they expressed it, the new birth of the sun. It was on the same day that the birth of the invincible sun, Natalis Solis Invicti, was celebrated in Rome. It can be seen in the Roman calendars published in the reign of Constantine and of Julian. It says in brackets, Hymn to the Sun, page 155. This epithet Invictus is the same as the Persians gave to the same god whom they worshipped by the name of Mithra and whom they caused to be born in a grotto, just as he's represented as being born in a stable under the name of Christ by the Christians. Concerning the Catholic feast of the Assumption and its parallel in astronomy, the same author adds, at the end of 8 months, when the sun god, having increased, traverses the 8th sign, he absorbs the celestial Virgin in his fiery course, and she disappears in the midst of the luminous rays and the glory of the sun. This phenomenon, and the glory of her son. This phenomenon, which takes place every year around the middle of August, gives rise to a festival that still exists and in which it's supposed that the Mother of Christ, laying aside her earthly life, is associated with the glory of her Son and is placed at his side in the heavens. The Roman calendar of Columella marks the death or disappearance of Virgo at this period. The sun, he says, passes into Virgo on the 13th day before the calends of September. This is where the Catholics place the Feast of Assumption, or the reunion of the Virgin to her Son. This feast was formerly called the Feast of the Passage of the Virgin, and in the Library of the Fathers we have an account of the passage of the Blessed Virgin. The ancient Greeks and Romans fixed the Assumption of Astrea, who is also the same virgin, on that day. And there's a note here. It says the following description of this phenomenon appears in a letter written by Jeremiah Shakerley in Lancashire, March 4th, 1648, quote, on Monday the 28th of February last, there arose with the sun 2 parallel, one on either side one. Their distance from him was by estimation about 10 degrees. I wonder if he means a sundog. Anyway, they continued still in the same distance from the zenith or height above the horizon that the sun did, and from the parts averse to the sun there seemed to issue out certain bright rays, not unlike those that the sun sendeth from behind a cloud, but brighter. The parts of these parallel which were towards the sun were of a mixed color, wherein green and red were most predominant. A little above them was a thin rainbow, scarcely discernible, of a bright color, with the concave towards the sun, and the ends thereof seeming to touch the parallel. Above that, in a clear, diaphanous air, appeared another conspicuous rainbow, beautified with diverse colors. It was as near as I could discern to the zenith. It seemed of something a lesser radiance than the others, they being back to back, yet a pretty way between. At or near the apparent time of the full moon they vanished, leaving abundance of terror and amazement in those that saw them. So he's describing some kind of, astrological, atmospheric, whatever phenomena. Kind of sounds like sundogs or something, but anyway. Let's see, this Virgin Mother, we're going back to the writing now. This Virgin Mother giving birth to the Sun God, which Christianity has so faithfully preserved, is a reminder of the inscription concerning her Egyptian prototype, Isis, which appeared on the temple of Sais. Quote, "The fruit which I have brought forth is the sun," end quote. While the Virgin was associated with the moon by the early pagans, there's no doubt that they also understood her position as a constellation in the heavens. For nearly all the peoples of antiquity credit her as being the mother of the sun, and they realized that although the moon could not occupy that position, the sign of Virgo could and did give birth to the sun out of her side on the 25th day of December. Albertus Magnus states, "We know that the sign of the Celestial Virgin rose over the horizon at the moment at which we fixed the birth of our Lord Jesus Christ." Among certain of the Arabian and Persian astronomers, the three stars forming the sword belt of Orion were called the Magi, who came to pay homage to the young sun god. The author of Mankind, Their Origin and Destiny contributes the following additional information. In Cancer, which had risen to the meridian at midnight, is the constellation of the stable and of the ass. The ancients called it Praesepe Jovis. In the north, the stars of the bear are seen, called by the Arabians Martha and Mary, and also the coffin of Lazarus. Thus, the esotericism of pagandom was embodied in Christianity, although its keys are lost. The Christian church blindly follows ancient customs, and when asked for a reason, gives superficial and unsatisfactory explanations, either forgetting or ignoring the indisputable fact that each religion is based upon the secret doctrines of its predecessor. The solar orb, like the nature of man, was divided by the ancient sages into three separate bodies. According to the mystics, there are 3 suns in each solar system, analogous to the 3 centers of life in each individual constitution. These are called 3 lights: the spiritual sun, the intellectual or solar sun, and the material sun, now symbolized in Freemasonry by 3 candles. The spiritual sun manifests the power of God, the Father. The solar sun radiates the life of God, the Son. And the material sun is the vehicle of manifestation for God, the Holy Spirit. Man's nature was divided by the mystics into 3 distinct parts: spirit, soul, and body. His physical body was unfolded and vitalized by the material sun, his spiritual nature illuminated by the spiritual sun, and his intellectual nature redeemed by the true light of grace, the solar sun. The alignment of these 3 globes in the heavens was one explanation offered for the peculiar fact that the orbits of the planets are not circular, but elliptical. The pagan priests always considered the solar system as a grand man and drew their analogy. That makes me think of Leonardo da Vinci's, that sketch that he did of the man, right? Anyways, and drew their analogy of these 3 centers of activity from the 3 main centers of life in the human body: the brain, the heart, and the generative system. The Transfiguration of Jesus describes 3 tabernacles, the largest being in the center, the heart, and a smaller one on either side, the brain and the generative system. It is possible that the philosophical hypothesis of the existence of the 3 suns is based upon a peculiar natural phenomenon which has occurred many times in history. In the 51st year after Christ, 3 suns were seen at once in the sky, and also in the 66th year. In the 69th year, 2 suns were seen together. According to William Lilly, between the years 1156 and 1648, 20 similar occurrences were recorded. My note, I think that's kind of interesting because I've been seeing online, people that are filming, and there are 2 suns seen in the sky. So I just think that's kind of interesting. Continuing. Recognizing the sun as the supreme benefactor of the material world, Hermeticists believed that there was a spiritual sun which ministered to the needs of the invisible and divine part of nature, human and universal. Anent this subject, the great Paracelsus wrote, "There is an earthly sun which is the cause of all heat, and all who are able to see may see the sun, and those who are blind and cannot see him may feel his heat. There is an eternal sun which is the source of all wisdom, and those whose spiritual senses have awakened to life will see that sun and be conscious of its existence. But those who have not attained spiritual consciousness may yet feel his power by an inner faculty which is called intuition." Certain Rosicrucian scholars have given special appellations to these three phases of the sun. The spiritual sun they called Vulcan. I just think that's interesting, doesn't it? You know, the Vulcans, Star Trek. Anyway, it's just, where'd they get that name? Okay, the spiritual sun they called Vulcan. The solar and intellectual sun, Christ and Lucifer respectively. And the material sun, what? And the material sun, the Jewish demiurge, Jehovah. Lucifer here represents the intellectual mind without the illumination of the spiritual mind. Therefore, it's a false light. Oh, dear. The false light is finally overcome and redeemed by the true light of the soul, called the second Logos, or Christ. Okay, so this is heavily Christianized BS, but anyway. The secret processes by which the Luciferian intellect is transmuted into the Christly intellect constitute one of the great secrets of alchemy and are symbolized by the process of transmuting base metals into gold. It's really funny because, Satan says that my wisdom is not separate from my heart, and what that's talking about is that you must always, no matter how much you know intellectually, you always have to have that connected to your heart, to your empathy, so that you have empathy, right? Because if you're just like intellectual with no emotions or any way to relate to anybody else or to put yourself in another person's shoes and therefore have empathy, you're just a freaking robot, right? You're just a robotoid. And here they are calling Lucifer a freaking robotoid. I just find that really insulting. I just got to say that, and then he's talking about how, oh yeah, but this whole Christ construct is the true light of the soul, So yeah, I think that there's definitely a little bit of obfuscation going on right there. And so, I'm definitely reading it with a grain of salt here. Yeah. In the rare treatise, and by the way, too, if all you ever do is think with your heart, then you're basically following Christ's suicidal advice, which is, to love your enemy. Because, you know what? You might as well be a doormat of the universe. You're a freaking idiot if that's, if you're constantly only thinking with your heart, oh, we have to love everybody. Ooh. You know what? Yeah, you're going to get stabbed. You're going to get stabbed over and over. You know what I mean? Like, you have to have both. You have to have the intellect, street smarts, but you also have to have the heart. And if you don't have those two things, then you're not connected to the first principle. And you're lost, Anyway, I could go on and on, but I'm trying to just read the damn thing here. So let's continue. In the rare treatise, The Secret Symbols of the Rosicrucians, Franz Hartmann defines the sun alchemically as the symbol of wisdom, the center of power, or the heart of things. The sun is a center of energy and a storehouse of power. Each living being contains within itself a center of life, which may grow to be a sun. And I'm just going to interject here because Sorath told me quite a long time ago that each of us contains a stargate or a sun, and that it's located where our solar is, the solar chakra. So anyway, here they are talking about, it's interesting. You're reading these older things, and I think that as with anything, that you're reading, you got to try and use your discernment to discern, what is truthful from what has been interjected into there, which is false, and you have to go with what resonates for you. And this idea that the sun is a center of energy and a storehouse of power, and that each living being contains within itself a center of life, which may grow to be a sun. In the heart of the regenerated, the divine power, stimulated by the light of the Logos, grows into a sun that illuminates his mind. That resonates for me. But that earlier bit about Christ, no. Anyways, in a note, the same author amplifies his description by adding, the terrestrial sun is the image or reflection of the invisible celestial sun. That's really interesting because it puts me in mind of something that I was just reading the other day as well, where they were talking about, when the soul is looking into, say, a moving body of water and it sees itself reflected, and then that reflection is kind of, flickering and inconstant and sort of broken up. It's not a really true kind of a reflection, you know what I mean? It's not as steady and constant as the actual thing that it's reflecting, basically. And that's kind of what this thing is talking about here. The invisible celestial sun, which is in the form of the realm of spirit, right? That one is more immutable, and the one that's terrestrial, that lies in the realm of matter, is but an image or reflection of it. But the invisible celestial sun is the one that actually has the power, and the terrestrial sun receives its power from it. Basically, I'm paraphrasing that there, but I just think that's pretty interesting there. All right, so in a note, the same author amplifies his description by adding, so I've just paraphrased it, now I'm going to read what he said. The terrestrial sun is the image or reflection of the invisible celestial sun. The former is in the realm of spirit, what the latter is in the realm of matter, but the latter receives its power from the former. In the majority of cases, the religions of antiquity agree that the material visible sun was a reflector rather than a source of power. The sun was sometimes represented as a shield carried on the arm of the sun god, as for example Frey, the Scandinavian solar deity. This sun reflected the light of the invisible spiritual sun, which was the true source of life, light, and truth. The physical nature of the universe is receptive. It is a realm of effects. The invisible causes of these effects belong to the spiritual world. I'd agree with that part. Yep. Hence, the spiritual world is the sphere of causation, and the material world is the sphere of effects, while the intellectual or soul world is the sphere of meditation. So they say that part, and that totally makes sense to me. And then he says this part, which I don't agree. Now he's saying that he's comparing Christ to the personified higher intellect and soul nature, and that's why he's called the mediator, who by virtue of his position and power says that no man comes to the Father but by me. See, and that is bullshit. That's bullshit. That is an inversion of something that was real. Because the reality is that we don't need any mediators. We have our own birthright connection to, the world or the sphere of causation, right? We're living in the sphere of effects, right? But yeah. We don't need some fucking Jesus Christ to come in and, that you can only reach to God or whatever you want to call it except through this egregore. And I think that is just horseshit. That is an inversion, and that is something that's really typical of the enemy of humanity. That is here on this planet, this negative coalition of parasites that are trying to suck us dry. And one of their weapons is this whole Christianity that they invented for us. So anyways. Don't even get me started on that. All right, so let's just jump down here to the next page. It sort of jumps here. Okay, some secret orders have taught that the sun was inhabited by a race of creatures with bodies composed of a radiant spiritual ether, not unlike in its consistency the actual glowing ball of the sun itself. The solar heat had no harmful effect on them because their organisms were sufficiently refined and sensitized to harmonize with the sun's tremendous vibratory rate. These creatures resemble miniature suns, being a little larger than a dinner plate in size, although some of the more powerful are considerably larger. Their color is the golden white light of the sun, and from them emanate 4 streamers of vril. These streamers are often of great length and are in constant motion. A peculiar palpitation is to be noted throughout the structure of the globe and is communicated in the form of ripples to the emanating streamers. And then they have to interject more Christianity here, but at any rate, I'll read it. The greatest and most luminous of these spheres is the Archangel Michael, and the entire order of solar life which resemble him and dwell upon the sun are called by Christians archangels, or the spirits of the light. Gold is the metal of the sun. It's another chapter here. Gold is the metal of the sun and has been considered by many as crystallized sunlight. When gold is mentioned in alchemical tracts, it may be either the metal itself or the celestial orb, which is the source or spirit of gold. Sulfur, because of its fiery nature, was also associated with the sun. As gold was a symbol of spirit and the base metals represented man's lower nature, certain alchemists were called miners and were pictured with picks and shovels digging into the earth in search of the precious metal, whose finer traits of character buried in the earthiness of materiality and ignorance. The hard carbon illustrates the same principle. The Illuminati used a pearl hidden in the shell of an oyster at the bottom of the sea to signify spiritual powers. Thus, the seeker after truth became a pearl fisher. He descended into the sea of material illusion in search of understanding, termed by the initiates the pearl of great price. See, that part, that resonated, that was real. It's like he's writing real stuff, and then he keeps interjecting this other stuff, this false stuff. I guess he's just trying to be even-handed and throw it all out there, right? And then you've got to use your own discernment, to try to figure out what's what here. So, yeah, read these, I would say, read these ancient texts and take from it what you will, for sure, because I think that there are definitely pearls of great price that you can find within them. But you've also got to be wary, too, because there's also going to be a lot of dross as well, Anyway, continuing. When the alchemists stated that every animate and inanimate thing in the universe contained the seeds of gold, they meant that even the grains of sand possessed a spiritual nature, for gold was the spirit of all things. Concerning these seeds of spiritual gold, the following Rosicrucian axiom is significant. A seed is useless and impotent unless it is put into its appropriate matrix. Franz Hartmann comments on this axiom with these words: a soul cannot develop and progress without an appropriate body, because it is the physical body that furnishes the material for its development. I got to interject there. I remember reading one thing that Maxine did have to say, and she also said, that you cannot develop and progress without being embodied, because it is you need to have a physical body. So interesting. Okay, the purpose of alchemy was not to make something out of nothing, but rather to fertilize and nurture the seed that was already present. That's interesting. its processes did nor actually create gold, but rather made the ever-present seed of gold grow and flourish. It's also, I just got to interject too, that like they're talking about perhaps, a literal gold, like a metal, right? But then there's also spiritual gold, right? Something very different. So, sometimes when you're reading about alchemy, you've got to understand that they're talking in allegories. They're using symbols. They're symbolizing something else that is unseen, or coming from the non-physical realms, and they're talking about it in a physical way, like that it's metals that are being transformed. But this is all symbolism and allegory, right? Everything that exists has a spirit, the seed of divinity within itself, and regeneration is not the process of attempting to place something where it previously had not existed. Regeneration actually means the unfoldment of the omnipresent divinity in man, that this divinity may shine forth as a sun and illuminate all with whom it comes into contact. Then what did I just say? We're really talking about spiritual stuff here. Okay, the midnight sun. Apuleius said when describing his initiation, "At midnight I saw the sun shining with a splendid light." That's an allegory. The midnight sun was also part of the mystery of alchemy. It symbolized the spirit in man shining through the darkness of his human organisms. It also referred to the spiritual sun in the solar system, which the mystic could see as well at midnight as at high noon. And I will interject there and say why. Why was that possible? Because they're using their third eye. Okay. Material earth brought powerless to obstruct the rays of this divine orb. The mysterious lights which illuminated... Now, I'm going to pause there for a second. And I remember watching a video where this person had been hypnotized, and they were asked to look at a clock or something, or a watch that somebody was holding. And they had another person standing between that person who was hypnotized and the person holding the clock or the watch or whatever it is. And he was able to actually literally be able to see, I'm making little, quotation marks with my fingers there. He's able to see through the obstruction of this other human being and look through using his third eye and be able to read what time it was. And that is something that was literally in a video that I was watching, and I thought, yeah, well, that's exactly it, right? So the mystic can see the spiritual sun in the solar system as well at midnight or as at high noon, the material earth being powerless to obstruct the rays of this divine orb. That's what it means. Anyhow, the mysterious lights which illuminated the temples of the Egyptian mysteries during the nocturnal hours were said by some to be reflections of the spiritual sun gathered by the magical power of the priests. Ooh, interesting. The weird light seen 10 miles below the surface of the earth by I Am the Man in that remarkable Masonic allegory, E.T. Dorfa, it's Aphrodite spelt backwards, may well refer to the mysterious midnight sun of the ancient rites. Wow. Okay, now that's interesting. I think that there's definitely a lot more going on under the surface there than what he just said right there. He just skipped over that. But I think there's a lot. You could really dig into that one. That's got some really interesting information in it. Continuing. He says primitive conceptions concerning the warfare between the principles of good and evil were often based upon the alternations of day and night. During the Middle Ages, the practices of black magic were confined to the nocturnal hours, and those who served the spirit of evil were called black magicians, while those who served the spirit of good were called white magicians. Black and white were associated respectively with night and day, and the endless conflict of light and shadow is alluded to many times in the mythologies of various peoples. The Egyptian demon Typhon was symbolized as part crocodile and part hog, because these animals are gross and earthy in both appearance and temperament. Since the world began, living things have feared the darkness. Those few creatures who use it as a shield for their maneuvers were usually connected with the spirit of evil. Consequently, cats, bats, toads, and owls are associated with witchcraft. In certain parts of Europe, it's still believed that at night, black magicians assume the bodies of wolves, skinwalkers, my interjection there, skinwalkers, and roam around destroying. From this notion originated the stories of the werewolves. Serpents, because they lived in the... Okay, I'm going to interject there as well. From this notion originated the stories of the werewolves. It's very interesting because, there are cryptids in those woods, and one of them is like a wolf man. I'm not sure if that's the right word. What do they call them? I'm blanking on it right now, but yeah, at any rate, Now, are those things genetically created, Were they created in a laboratory at some point? Dogman, that's it. That's what they're called. Yeah, go look that up. There's tons and tons of first-hand accounts of people who have encountered these things. There's a lot more out there than, people really understand. There's a lot of stuff going on out there. Okay, anyways. So yeah, people that have seen these dogmen, the first thing that springs to their minds is werewolves, because that's exactly what they look like. Okay. Serpents, because they lived in the earth, were associated with the spirit of darkness. As the battle between good and evil centers around the use of the generative forces of nature, winged serpents represent the regeneration of the animal nature of man, or those great ones in whom this regeneration is complete. Among the Egyptians, the sun's rays are often shown, ending in human hands. Masons will find a connection between these hands and the well-known paw of the lion, which raises all things to life with its grip. Now that's interesting. Solar colors. The theory so long held of 3 primary and 4 secondary colors is purely exoteric, for since the earliest periods, it's been known that there are 7 and not 3 primary colors, the human eye being capable of estimating only 3 of them. Thus, although green can be made by combining blue and yellow, there's also a true or primary green that's not a compound. This can be proved by breaking up the spectrum with a prism. Helmholtz found that the so-called secondary colors of the spectrum could not be broken up into their supposed primary colors. Thus, the orange of the spectrum, if passed through a second prism, does not break up into red and yellow, but remains orange. Consciousness, intelligence, and force are fittingly symbolized by the colors blue, yellow, and red. The therapeutic effects of the colors, moreover, are in harmony with this concept, for blue is a fine, soothing, electrical color, yellow, a vitalizing and refining color, and red, an agitating and heat-giving color. It's also been demonstrated that minerals and plants affect the human constitution according to their colors. Thus, a yellow flower generally yields a medicine that affects the constitution in a manner similar to yellow light, or the musical tone, mi. An orange flower will influence in a manner similar to orange light, and, being one of the so-called secondary colors, corresponds either to the tone, let me see, what is that? Re, or to the chord of do and mi. The ancients conceived the spirit of man to correspond with the color blue, the mind with yellow, and the body with red. Heaven is therefore blue, earth yellow, and hell, or the underworld, red. The fiery condition of the inferno merely symbolizes the nature of the sphere or plane of force of which it is composed. In the Greek mysteries, the irrational sphere was always considered red, for it represented that condition in which consciousness is enslaved by the lusts and passions of the lower nature. Ooh. In India, certain of the gods, usually attributes of Vishnu, are depicted with blue skin to signify their divine and supermundane constitution. According to esoteric philosophy, blue is the true and sacred color of the sun. I just think that's interesting, because the energy color that Satan brings with him is also blue. Just saying. The apparent orange-yellow shade of this orb is the result of its rays being immersed in the substances of the illusionary world. Oh boy, I was going to talk about Christian church now. Yippee. In the original symbolism of the Christian church, colors were of first importance, and their use was regulated according to carefully prepared rules. Since the Middle Ages, however, the carelessness with which colors have been employed has resulted in the loss of their deeper emblematic meanings. In its primary aspect, white or silver signified life, purity, innocence, joy, and light. Red, oh goodness, red, the suffering and death of Christ and his saints. Whatever. Red also signified divine love, blood, warfare, suffering. Blue, the heavenly sphere and the states of godliness and contemplation. Yellow or gold, glory, fruitfulness and goodness. Green, fecundity, youthfulness, prosperity. Violet, humility, deep affection and sorrow. Black, death, destruction, and humiliation. Well, that's interesting because they had their monks dressed in black. In early church art, the colors of robes and ornaments also revealed whether a saint had been martyred, as well as the character of the work that he'd done to deserve canonization. In addition to the colors of the spectrum, there are a vast number of vibratory color waves, some too low and others too high to be registered by the human optical apparatus. It is appalling to contemplate man's colossal ignorance concerning these vistas of abstract space. I just want to interject right there and say, it really is actually appalling, when you contemplate how badly we've been held back, especially in terms of medical modalities, like for example, I'm sure that there's light healing that can be done with medical beds where they're just utilizing these different vibrations of the different colors to heal people instead of hacking them open or, burning them with radiation, So, our medical right now is at such a primitive level and condition, and people are suffering needlessly. It's needless. It's appalling. I'll agree with that. All right, and then it says, as in the past, man explored unknown continents, so in the future, armed with curious implements fashioned for the purpose, he will explore these little-known fastnesses of light, color, sound, and consciousness. Well, Nikola Tesla did say, if you want to understand the universe, then you got to understand frequency and vibration, right? And colors are that's what colors are. They're different frequencies and vibrations, and they translate into different colors. And then there's an image here. It says the solar face. It's like an image of the sun with the rays, It says the corona of the sun is here shown in the form of a lion's mane. And this is a subtle reminder of the fact that at one time, the summer solstice took place in the sign of Leo, the celestial lion. Okay, well, that brings us up to the top of the hour, and that concludes this part of this text. I hope that you've enjoyed listening. It's been fun, and you guys have a terrific weekend or week, and take care of yourselves, and we'll see you back here again soon. Thanks for listening, and bye for now. Bye, guys.